It's a delicious last course. Oh, the delicious last course. One can eat their fill and still stay until the delicious last course. It's a delicious.
Few games are as unique as Cuphead. It was an instant classic as soon as players laid eyes on the amazing craftsmanship involved in recreating the style of cartoons from the Fleischer Studios era, the 1930s. Over 50,000 frames of hand-draw animation, always gorgeously executed and creatively inspired in its concepts. Fans of the game have been waiting for almost 5 years to get more of Cuphead, and it finally happened with the delicious last course. In this video, I will examine the original game, what the DLC brought to the table, and some of the interesting issues that emerged throughout my many playthroughs. I hope you enjoy. From the adorable tutorial, you get most of what you need. You have a jump, a dash, you can shoot in 8 directions, parry pink objects, and gain cards you can use for a special attack. You can also get more weapons by collecting coins, as well as buy charms that add abilities to your character. The shop is run by Porkrind, who wants to get rid of you as soon as possible to get back to his porky wife. As you go through the levels, you find out how the game gets wacky, although the first bosses may lull you into a false sense of security. Believe me, they all want you dead. Later, you find the plane you use for some bosses, which gives you extended maneuverability, but the game is not shy to throw more of a bullet hell at you right there. A crescendo of both difficulty and wackiness takes you from boss to boss in Cuphead. The delicious last course is no different, but somehow has even better animation, with some gameplay concepts added for good measure. The main star is Miss Chalice, a new playable character based on a supporting NPC from the original game. Playing as Chalice changes things due to her increased moves, including a double jump, an invincible roll, and parrying out of dashes. Apparently to balance the characters, she is implemented as an equipable charm, given that some charms would be redundant or too powerful if applied to her. It is not perfect, but makes for a good solution, particularly with the additions accessible only to Cuphead and his pal Mugman. She also gets different super moves, which you can use after collecting 5 cards. Cuphead was designed as a boss rush, with the run and gun levels developed mostly to provide some variety. They are good visually and more clearly resemble the Contra style the game is paying homage to, but seldom capitalize on the game mechanics well enough to justify replaying them, unless you want to go for the pacifist trophy. The exceptions are some clever uses of the parry mechanic. Ultimately, Studio MDHR was wise by not making these levels mandatory to beat the game, as bosses are the highlight of everything Cuphead has to offer. But it's still frustrating that you can only buy weapons or charms at a specific order. For me it is not a big problem because I favor the roundabout, which is always available, but other players might have to collect too many coins for no good reason. The only upgrade that renders another obsolete is the double heart charm, and there were other options to make it accessible only by the end. It is a minor complaint that does not detract much from the game's strengths, however, and for that we should look at the bosses. Each one looks more creative than the last, but soon you learn that they get even better in that department as the fights advance, given the focus on transformations. In cartoons from that era, a lot of the fun was derived from how bizarre and surreal characters and situations would present themselves, bending the rules of physics and undergoing transformations, sometimes with very disturbing imagery. Can you believe this was intended for kids once? In Cuphead, this became a design philosophy, with almost every boss transforming in unexpected ways. For example, Baroness von Boom Boom turns her candy castle alive to move slowly towards you, using her severed head as a homing projectile. Peppy the clown starts in a bumper car, then summons hot dog balloons as he is a balloon himself, rides a merry-go-round and then becomes the merry-go-round, spawning a roller coaster and penguins shooting baseballs at you. The list goes on and on and on. Transformations are also a theme in the DLC, as Miss Chalice wants to become human again, and when you take a bite of the cookie charm, Cuphead becomes a ghost, so she can come to life in his place. Bosses follow the script from the base game as well, and there is a side quest to rebuild a broken relic into a charm that eventually provides you with multiple abilities at once. Although there is no shortage of weird transformations that provide new challenges with each boss phase, they also demonstrate the limitations of Cuphead as a game. The reason is gameplay almost never meaningfully changes beyond the decisions you make about weapons or charms. You have the parry options during a boss to get extra cards and to do some environmental management, like when you have to hit the sides of the cart against the ghost train to manage your positioning. But with only one exception, you can just put a tape over the button you used to shoot and never bother with it again. You can keep always shooting mindlessly, facing potential repercussions only against the last phase of the dragon, because you can make things harder for yourself if you hit his projectiles. There is a great weapon for this phase though. With the DLC now, you have a total of 9 weapons, each with some quirks that can make gameplay more interesting. The Chaser allows you to focus entirely on dodging, as the shots always find their way to the boss and destructible projectiles. It makes it easier, but also reduces the damage dealt. Using it, the game becomes even more mindless in terms of the actual shooting, but it can provide help to struggling players. The Crack Shot, a type of upgraded chaser, does not make it as easy, but also deals very good damage. Roundabout allows you to shoot in the opposite direction and still hit the boss, with no penalty to the damage, easily my favorite. The one that spices things up a little bit more is the Charge though, because for it to be effective you need to charge your shot and be a bit more tactical about when to shoot it, or how to be lined up in a way that makes it efficient. Some people have trouble using it precisely for this reason, but I would recommend every player who beat the game to give it a try in a replay. The electric shot introduced in the DLC becomes a more concentrated spread and deals amazing damage if you're stuck in place aiming, a little more difficult to control but useful in some situations. This is not enough though. Don't get me wrong, the game is still very enjoyable as is, but the smell of missed opportunities gets stronger the closer you get to master the mechanics. There is potential for many kinds of strategies in fights, but it's not realized as often as it could. My favorite plain boss, Dr. Carl's robot, has 3 separate parts that must be destroyed before the boss transforms into second phase. After you break one part, its attacks change, so you have to decide what you want to break first, as you have to deal with different problems depending on your choices. It is noteworthy because it is an exception. While in most situations the only way Studio MDHR found to increase the challenge was to rely heavily on randomness, decreasing the game's consistency. My least favorite boss, or rather more hated boss, this nosy bee reporter, is greatly diminished by it because the top-bottom scrolling platforms are randomly missing. Sometimes you get lucky and the side you are has options, but sometimes you're screwed, and the maneuvers necessary to save you are unreasonably hard or outright not possible. If you could control how many platforms you would get by performing specific parries or shooting something in the arena, it would be a more interesting fight. And this is only talking about how bosses could be more engaging and allow a more active role to players. The most important missed opportunity is on the side of Cuphead, the player character more specifically. The special moves that cost 1 card sometimes have interesting features, but they are mostly just another shot, a bit more powerful but still basic in terms of player action and presentation. In a game with such a focus on cartoonish transformations, why is there not something like summoning a big hammer to bonk bosses? Or maybe become an animal for a hot second and perform a special attack? The 5-card moves are a little more creative. Well, is that Soda? I think it's Soda. Let's say it's Soda. But the sky was the limit here. Sadly, you as the player do not get to be as transformative and interesting as the bosses you fight. The DLC introduced a new super ability for Miss Chalice that hints at this kind of approach, but did not get further. It may be unfair to ask even more creativity and work on hand-draw animations, but I would gladly accept having a couple fewer bosses or run-and-gun levels as a trade-off. The DLC did not improve that aspect significantly, but it did find a better way to get coins and provide parry challenges in the King's Leap. It went a little bit overboard with the pawns, as they have random patterns that cannot be all fair, as they can jump on top of you too fast. The Horse Knight is a great visual design, but it can get boring as you need 20 parries to defeat him. Bishop and Rook were very well designed and the highlights, with the Queen being a little underwhelming. It is an overall fun gauntlet with amazing presentation, particularly the stop-motion castle. Although the absence of transformations on the player character side is my main problem with Cuphead, there are some nitpicks I would be remiss not to mention. The word nitpick is used when you have some criticism that is ultimately unimportant, when you are being the annoying person pointing out a small imperfection. But nitpicking comes from the necessity of picking off nits from children's heads, and nits are the eggs of lice. Lice! I hope you never had lice, and my mother did an awesome job preventing me from getting them, but believe me that nitpicking is important to keep your head clean. That or shampoo. Anyhow, back in the days of NES difficulty, the era of games from which Cuphead is taking its gameplay inspiration, to justify the cost of a cartridge, they made the games very hard. Fairness was not a big concern at the time. Cuphead is not that unfair, mainly because you can replay any boss immediately and you never lose progress, even achievements do not expect perfection. The game does not want players to get too frustrated, but sometimes it fails. Some combinations of attacks are impossible to react to, or clearly not thought out in all its interactions, or are so heavily dependent on randomness that it can become a nightmare to deal with if you want to get perfect scores. The Delicious Last Course has a few situations like this. This phase transition animation in Moonshine Mob, which already can have minions spawning on top of you, is particularly egregious. I already mentioned the pawns, but the bishop can summon a bell right on top of you after a parry, when you momentarily have no control. The patterns of bows in the dog fights last phase can overlap in a way only Smoke Bomb can save you. A perfectly safe platform can randomly start to move up in No Way Out, with no time to react, and so on. Other sources of frustration not related to getting hit in fights are less important but head scratchers nonetheless. Why is it not possible to replay Mausoleums or the DLC secret boss? You can replay every other level in the game, why not Mausoleums that are the only easy way to practice parrying? Speaking of parries, the scoring system is too half-baked. Fortunately, specific scores are not required to beat the game, but it is weird that you must use special moves to get higher scores, when using them increases your chances of finishing on time and not getting hit already. The same goes for parries. Requiring 3 can be very frustrating as some bosses only provide parrying opportunities for a limited time and not consistently. In the DLC it is not a big problem, but bosses like Green Matchstick or Werner Vermin can require multiple early retries only due to randomness. By the way, if you left a comment already informing me that you actually can repeat the Mausoleums, Please tell me how you found out. The game does not tell, for some obscure reason, that you only need to face the mausoleum and press L1 and R1 together to get the prompt. I would bet everything on King Dice's casino that 99% of players never find out. If you found out only right now, let me know. I talked a lot about problematic things in Cuphead, but it all feels very minor compared to the game itself. There is one thing in economics called reviewed preferences, the idea that you can figure out how much value people place on things based on their habits. For example, someone might say they like healthy food but eat at McDonald's 5 times a week. Their stated preference is not accurate, it is the habit that reveals the real preference. Although I cannot say Cuphead is a perfect game, I just cannot stop playing it. My preferences are reviewed. I have the game on PC, on PlayStation, on Xbox. I played it for dozens of hours in all of them, and now the delicious last course will make me play even more. I need to try to defeat every boss in the game using each of the new 3 weapons. I still have some S scores to get. I really want to be able to do the entire game in under 2 hours without dying even once. But even after I get all that, and years have passed and many other games, even some better ones, capture my attention, from time to time I will look at my library and maybe tell my wife it is time for us to play some Cuphead. Some games never leave you. That is all, folks.